did you guys hear about the big shakeup at Walt Disney Company?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Iger, what's his name? Iger?
Iger's back.
Bob Chapek was Chapek was the. This is what I get for reading everything. I need to watch TV more.
Is he the guy who was in Chappie?
Was he's been the CEO since Bob Iger retired a couple of years ago. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but over the last year and a half, Disney has been one of the worst performing major stocks. Market's down about a third, a little less than a third now. Disney shares are down more than 50%. And well, there's been a board shakeup. And I think what shocked everybody wasn't so much that they got rid of Chapek, but that they brought back Bob Iger for 2 more years. Who knows, maybe longer.
And it was all above board. And the way democratically run companies are run these days by leading progressive thought leaders, because the way the employees found out about it was Bob Iger wrote an email to them that basically said, "Oh, I'm humbled and startled that here I am and I'm back." So he announced his own. It was almost like it was a military coup and he was in charge now.
Right. They should have done a video with 2 soldiers standing behind him.
That's right.
So there's actually quite a lot going on here with this.
Oh, yeah.
Chapek was trying, he didn't have anything like the authority. I forget, who's the guy at Warner who just basically went in and canceled Batgirl. He just said it's garbage. So anyway, that guy, whose name eludes me like everything else, that guy had actual power. But Chapek was trying to detoxify Disney, and he was doing it as fast as he could, but he didn't have anything like that kind of unilateral power. So Chapek was trying to get Disney to be less aggressively woke. And all of the people that got Disney's stock price in half were people who were appointed by Bob Iger.
Yeah, I was going to say Iger's the architect of a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely. He absolutely is. Iger's the guy who put those people in place, whose video got leaked, that got sent to, that made the Florida legislature change the law that hurt Disney really badly. They said that the reason that they let Chapek go was that he was basically talking to the leading shareholders about Disney Plus, which has lost a mere $1.5 billion
in its first year.
That's in the red. That's it's not government money, but it's
when you're done.
No, Bill, they didn't excuse him because of anything that he did bad. They sent him off with their gratitude for his long service at the company. There's nothing negative in this.
He wanted to spend more time with his family.
Exactly.
But in any event, so what they basically did was they assumed that this tumble in stock prices they wanted to blame that on Bob Chapek, but he was the one who was trying to make Disney into a family entertainment company again. Yeah. And so what they did was they got rid of him and replaced him with the guy that made Disney so toxic in the first place. And I say, great.
This is great. Scott, no, you go ahead. I'll save mine for
I don't have anything.
Oh, okay. Then I'll go. That's not to say that Chapek is entirely innocent here, because Bill, you mentioned Disney Plus and how much money it's lost. They turned Disney Plus into this fire hose of content. It just spewed out, and except it's the fire hoses that they filled with excrement for the farmers in protest of all the. It just spews crap all over the place. Stuff like Book of Boba Fett, She-Hulk, what was
Obi-Wan.
Loki. Oh my God, was that bad?
Horrible. Obi-Wan, all of it.
Obi-Wan was terrible.
Yeah, so it's got Marvel or Star Wars on it, so it can't possibly fail. Let's make 50 of them. We'll make them woke garbage. We'll make a series called Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan does nothing but run away and surrender. We'll destroy all of this stuff because it can't fail if it's got Star Wars on it or Marvel on it or Disney on it. But they're failing themselves right out of business. And I got to tell you, just sitting here now, for the first time, I realized I feel the same way about Disney now that I feel about the SLS, about the Space Launch System. It's like it doesn't deserve to survive in the competitive market anymore. Both of them owned my heart. Yeah. I grew up in Florida. I went to Disney World 20 times as a kid, and they have. They've gone so far off the rails that that seeing them try to recover is just postponing the inevitable. And I'd rather they just, it's like watching season 37 of The Simpsons, right? It's like I used to love I haven't watched that show in 25 years because it got so awful. I couldn't bear it. I just couldn't bear it. And I think that the board is largely to blame for this.
The way they sell these streaming services, including Disney Plus, reminds me, and when you said that, Steve, this content fire hose, it reminded me of when I worked for Time Warner Cable in one of its local affiliates around the country. And they, as a benefit of working for Time Warner Cable, you got everything except for pay-per-view. You didn't get free pay-per-view, but they would come and install cable at your house, and you had HBO and Cinemax and Showtime and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so the guy's there installing our cable, and I'm looking at it, he's flicking through the channels, and I said, we had young children at the time, and frankly, we just don't watch that kind of we didn't watch the kind of stuff that we wouldn't show to young children, basically. Yeah. And so I said, can you block that channel? And and I made a list of channels that I wanted him to block. And at one point, the install guy said to my wife, are there any channels that your husband doesn't want blocked? And
it'd be much quicker just to block everything.
And I used to say to my friends, I said, look, there's some good stuff on TV, but the approach that most people take is basically saying, hey, let's open the window a little bit and let's bring a sewer pipe into our living room and just turn it on and let it flow on the off chance that we might find a diamond ring in there somewhere that somebody dropped down the toilet. And that, it's kind of like we take the streaming service because we want one thing that is appealing to us. And as a consequence, we get everything. And we wind up watching, at worst, some really horrible things. At best, some stuff that's just sucking our precious time away and returning nothing in the bargain, so that our lives are truncated and impoverished because we allowed them to take over our brain for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's the board. It's the board, right? They're the people that went back to Bob Iger.
Yeah.
Eisner ruined Disney, and then what was his name came after Eisner? The funny looking guy, and then Iger after that.
Funny looking guy.
What was his name? Anyway, I think it might have been another
Pluto.
Who? No, I think it might have been another guy, another Mike. I forget. But anyway, he also continued to run it into the ground. And it's not just the streaming services. I've heard from people who've been to Disney World that the rides are just they're falling apart.
Oh,
I went to
is
Epcot.
known as Chapek. I learned from one of my commenters at Vodka Pundit, because there are videos and pictures all over Facebook of trash at Disney World and at Disneyland.
That's inconceivable to me. Inconceivable. And I remember I went to Epcot, which I never liked, but I went to Epcot, must have been, at least 10 years ago. And even then, you just chipped plaster everywhere and stuff. If you want to know how far Disney has fallen, here's a pretty good metric for you. It's a Small World, after all, has drained the little canal, and now you walk through it.
What?
Yes.
Now, when I was there
the world's worst ride to begin with, and now you got to walk through it?
Now you have to walk through it.
Bill, didn't we go through in a boat?
Yes, but you don't go through in a boat anymore. Now you walk through it.
Okay.
You know what really broke my heart was watching what Disney did to Pixar. You could tell that Pixar was a Steve Jobs company because they had these sort of organic found plots. I give you a great example. You have back-to-back weird movies that no other studio would have produced. Ratatouille, the story of a rat that wanted to become a chef, and I
fell asleep during that movie.
And Cars, the original Cars movie, which I don't know. When you think about this, it's not a movie that should have happened, other than the fact that they could sell a lot of cars to toys for this movie. And apparently, there's a story. I don't know if it's true or not, that when Pixar was still a separate company, but Disney was the distributor, they went to Disney and said, hey, we've got this movie we want to do about a rat. And Disney said, we can't distribute that. There are no toys to sell. We can't sell any toy rats. And the Pixar guy says, but after that, we got one with cute cars with eyeballs.
Deal.
And Disney lit up. Again, I don't know if that story is true, but these just genuinely weird, unusual, heartwarming movies that really couldn't happen anywhere else. And it just, I guess since Jobs died and Pixar got sold to Disney, it's just another content machine. I can't remember the last Pixar movie that pulled me in with it's just organic, wonderful weirdness the way and those two did.
There was a stretch there when people in this business were talking about the Pixar miracle. Could you deconstruct how it's possible that a studio could have 9 blockbusters in the row or whatever without a single failure or even a mediocre movie? Yeah. They all just bam, 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 out of the park home runs. And now you got Toy Story 4, and
A Good Dinosaur
2, and you've got not only do you have bad new movies, but anytime you see a studio going to the remake box more than once, or you really have to ask yourself some questions about that. They lost their soul, and they lost it to this idea, this Disney insanity, that it's not quality, it's quantity. It's how much stuff can we gush out. Yeah. It's we'll bleed the franchise dry, we'll ruin it, we'll kill it, we'll kill Star Wars, we'll kill everything. And I've heard from so many people that Andor, this latest Star Wars series out there, people are saying it's actually very good, but nobody's watching it because nobody cares anymore. Nobody cares. They've just plain killed it.
You know what?
And
so, Steve,
I was going to watch Andor because I had heard it was good, and then my brain is so filled up with all of this fire hose of content, I forgot again.
That's my point, right? That's my point. How do you kill Star Wars? Well, the answer is slowly but surely. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
And of all of this, I remember I had a chance to introduce Glenn Beck at an event out here, and Glenn collects a lot of really cool stuff. He certainly earned some money, and he's earned every penny of it. He likes to buy cool stuff, and he showed a bunch of them. And one of the things he showed was the prospectus, the original prospectus for Disneyland. And it was 2-3 pages. This is what we would like to do. And Walt says, we want this to be a celebration of American values. We want everybody to feel welcome here. We don't want anybody to feel left out. We want this to be the happiest place on earth. We want it to be upbeat, positive. At the University of Florida, which is about 90 minutes north of Orlando, we had a lot of people, especially in the theater department, working at Disney during the summer, because, you can get a lot of people to take tickets, but if you got somebody doing Jungle Cruise or something like that, you generally want an actor, And I remember all my friends just, bitching and complaining about how they had to have their haircuts, and they had to shave and all this other stuff. And the fascists.
No filthy hippies at Disney World.
But it was spotless and immaculate. And to say that Walt would be rolling in his grave is just an insult to the entire cliche. So they've turned this into, when you look at that leaked Zoom call or whatever it was, the one where they're saying we're putting as much gay and as much trans content into this as possible.
Into kids shows.
For kids shows, right. It's like they don't even know what sex is. They don't have any idea. Well, they didn't anyway. So when you see that, you realize that it's not just a company that's become anti-family. It's become the family brand has become the most anti-family, anti-wholesome force on the market. And they own just about everything. They own just about everything.
Steve, all right, so beyond our normal concerns about Disney, what do you think are the implications of this change in leadership? Anything? Is anything going to be different? Or is it just a death spiral, desperate attempt by the board?
Iger knew how to run the business side better than Chapek did. So maybe they'll return to some profitability. Well, maybe they're still making money, but maybe they'll make the kind of money that will turn around their share price, which I'm guessing is what the board is looking for. But I'll tell you this much: I haven't looked at the markets today. We're taping this on Tuesday, but when I was writing the story up for PJ Media on Monday, Disney shares had sunk on the news that Bob Iger was coming back.
Sure.
Well, I guess it never looks good, personalities aside, or that particular company aside, it never looks good if you change leaders for a bold new direction, and then you go a couple of years and you go, maybe let's go back to the bold old direction. Like anytime you're backtracking to a previous leader, unless that person was like a Steve Jobs character where he was seen as a hero, or Lee Iacocca in the auto industry was seen as a hero who was before his time and got marginalized, and then they bring him back with much fanfare. But I don't think we have that as the case here.
So expect Disney to continue to do the kind of things that have caused them to lose $1.5 billion in their streaming service. Chapek's reign was a year and a half, maybe? And he tried to turn it around, although he was under enormous pressure. I remember he came out pretty strongly. He didn't come out strongly enough in terms of his hatred for the state of Florida after they passed the law saying that you can't indoctrinate kids in sexual identity in second grade or third grade. You have to wait to fourth grade before you can do that. And Chapek did not come out strongly enough against this. And the trans mob at Disney, a trans mob of employees, all threatened to, resign. So then Chapek does the bowing and scraping and I didn't realize my privilege and I need to go and I need to educate myself and I promise I'll do better. Does the whole kind of walk across the broken glass on your knees kind of thing. And just last episode we talked about Elon Musk coming in and saying from now on, extraordinary performance and extraordinary effort will be the minimum passing grade for this company. And there's your difference, man. There's your difference right there.
Yeah.
We just saw, I don't even know, maybe they're owned by Disney too. Is Marvel owned by Disney?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So we just saw Wakanda Forever, very entertaining film, amazing special effects. But what always blows me away with these kind of movies, especially the Marvel movies, is the credits at the end and how many visual effects people are involved in it. And in this case, I didn't count them, but it looked like there was at least 13 different visual effects companies involved in this production, including Industrial Light and Magic and Weta, which did the Lord of the Rings movies for Peter Jackson. And, just at the beginning of the credits, it's like, okay, here's the 20 actors who were involved in the production. And then here's the 6,000 people.
It's a standing army.
Who were tapping trackpads to make images, get bigger or smaller, or bluer or grayer or whatever. But it really is a phenomenal special effects movie. In general, highly watchable. Very few off moments. They did kind of stick something in there where it was one of those moments where you feel like the director or the screenwriter should appear on the screen for a moment and go, listen, we just want to make sure you know this.
Oh, yeah.
It's just apropos of nothing, unconnected to the story. We just want to stick just for a second there. We want to make sure that you are getting this message. But in general, we thoroughly enjoyed it and thought it was a lot of fun.
Let me finish I haven't seen Wakanda Forever yet. I'm really burned out on MCU. They had finished telling the story with Endgame, and now I'm done because a few examples
when
I've
you
seen
kill everybody and then bring
stinkers.
them all back.
Yeah. That said, Scott, you mentioned the great special effects in Wakanda Forever. I grew up watching horror and sci-fi movies that had been made in the 50s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where special effects were primitive. They just had to be good enough to allow you to suspend your disbelief. And that's all we asked for. Except, well, it was a horror movie. You wanted the gore. I always wanted the gore. But other than that, they just had to be good enough that you could stay inside the story. And and the practical effects were exceedingly clever. The good ones were to allow you to do that. I'm a huge fan of practical effects for that reason. That said, when you say great special effects these days with all the computer guys, that's really the lowest bar you can possibly set. Yeah. Right now, you should only notice the special effects when they're bad. She-Hulk would be an example of that. They should just stay out of the way. They should be seamless and invisible because perfection is possible.
That was my son's comment about it, Steve. What you just said. He said there's a lot of water in the movie, a lot of ocean.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do. And my son's comment, and he's in his mid-20s, his comment was, I was amazed that there was so much of that, and yet I was never taken out of the movie by my thinking about what was going on the screen. It was so immersive, literally, that it worked.
But all that said, there isn't enough CGI in the world to cover up for Disney's failures.
Well, I got a little something to add to this. There's a guy on YouTube who does the best dinosaur animation I've ever seen, ever. It's unbelievable. And I'm watching this, because you're right. I didn't see Wakanda Forever, but I did see Black Adam, and it's got to be pretty close to 1,000 people, at least, maybe more than that, working on special effects. Yeah. And I just finished a 15-minute animated film where the cast is 2 people and the post-production team is 1 person, and so I understand how this works. And I'm watching this guy doing his dinosaur things, and I said, what is it that's working so well here? And I realized he's shooting live action plates and he's compositing the dinosaurs into them. He's got you'll see pterosaurs floating over a beach where there's a carcass of some dinosaur washed up on the shore. And I realized, man, that guy got the water looking good. It's no, he didn't. That's real water.
That's water.
That's it. Yeah.
Good for him.
So last night on Stratosphere Studios, somebody said, why do you think that Lord of the Rings was so good and The Hobbit was so bad? It was 20 years later. He's had all this experience. And the answer was very clear to me. The reason that The Hobbit was so much worse than Lord of the Rings was because computer graphics had gotten so much better. Yeah. Right? See, once you get seduced into that, then all kinds of things follow, and not even Peter Jackson was smart enough to see it. So when they made Lord of the Rings, it was released in 2001, 2, and 3, but basically it was shot in the end of the 90s, right? And I remember looking at the Lord of the Rings movies, and when I saw Minas Tirith, I thought, that is without question the best computer graphics I have ever seen in my life. And the reason it was the best computer graphics I'd ever seen in my life, because it wasn't computer graphics.
They built what they called a large scale miniature. Yeah.
Bigatures. So instead of a miniature, they made Minas Tirith is it's 20 feet tall, but it's real. They just take it out in the sunlight and light it the way it would be lit. And then they animate in the little horses and the people. And by the time, because computer graphics were so poor back in the very beginning of the 2000s, he couldn't use CG orcs. He had to use real people with prosthetic makeup. And that's why those fight scenes so real, because they're real, right? You got a 250-pound guy. It's an enormous guy. And you cannot animate that. It's just not possible.
He really nailed the physics of that, didn't he?
Yeah, it's almost
the huge battle scenes were CGI, but they were brief. You get an overview.
The wide shots were CGI, but all of the actual combat was real people. Yeah. And as I've said many times, the genius of Peter Jackson in Lord of the Rings was he understood the details. There's a term for something that's a close-up on a camera. It's called a hero. It's a hero outfit. For instance, on Lost in Space, they had the hero robot, which was their detailed robot. Then they had kind of a robot you would use if it needed to get danged up, So hero costume would be something that's really designed for camera close-ups. And any other production ever in history, if you had 200 riders of Rohan there, you would put hero armor on the lead guy, and then the 2 guys on the horse with him. And then the first row would be slightly less detailed, second row less detailed. By the time you get to the third row, you're not going to see those guys at all. It's really just throw something on that's roughly the same color.
Yeah.
Right. You save a lot of time and a lot of effort. But Peter Jackson and White said, no, we're not going to do that. Every single person in this movie is going to be wearing hero armor because it's going to affect their performance. Yeah. And people say, well, they're background extras. Well, yes, but you look at the soldiers marching out of Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings versus the soldiers marching out of Numenor in Rings of Power. And the guys in Rings of Power look like they've never worn boots in their life, let alone been in the military. They just look like, what happened to my sandals?
Do you ever see any, I'm sure you did, the backstage stuff from the original trilogy of where they were forging the swords and things like that. And you're like, holy cow, like that's real. Like they're making
really
swords.
Good looking.
It was amazing.
Because they were making swords.
Yeah.
And when Aragorn had to carry the sword.
Uh-oh. He's leaving to get a sword.
Oh,
this one.
Nice broadsword.
Nice.
Thank you very much. It's not just a broadsword.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to slight your broadsword.
No, it's not a broadsword. It's the flame of the West is what it is. Okay. But in any event, those things have weight. And the reason I brought the sword into the studio, aside from the fact that, the occasional dubious characters in the hallway still wearing their masks, is because when I was doing motion capture with that sword, it's astonishing how heavy that bloody sword is. I mean, it really is. If you think you can just hold this thing out there like this, with one hand for 15, 20 minutes, forget it. And that's not something you can fake. So all of the armor was made by actual armorers and were actual metal, and it weighed a lot and it affected their movements.
Yep.
And once you get into the CG world, you not only lose that sense of realism in terms of the image quality, you also lose the realism of interacting with the real world. Swords don't have any weight. You've got an animator who's trying to make this thing look heavy. He does a good job, but it's not the same thing. But the most important problem is once you have that kind of CG that they had in The Hobbit, then that allows you to do things with the camera that you could never do in the real world. And now it's all over. You're gone. There's that scene in The Hobbit where they're in the Goblin Kingdom, and a bridge cuts away, or a platform, and they go, and all the dwarfs are on it, and Bilbo, and they go down, 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 smash into the ground, absolutely fatal impact, right? And then this 400-pound thing falls on top of them, another fatal impact, and they're going, oof, and it's like, you couldn't get that shot practically because you would have killed the stunt people. But the fact that you could do it in the computer meant that you could do it. Yeah. And there you go. You're off the rails. You're gone.
One last thing on this subject.
That's why Bob Iger had to come back to Disney.
One last thing on this subject. And this is really a message for movie and TV directors, because you always get this one wrong. Get it right. When your character has a paper cup from like Starbucks or something, put some water in there, because I can always tell when they're waving around a cup filled with air and taking a fake sip out of a cup filled with air. Just put some damn water in the cup and make it look right. Okay, sorry.
Amen to that, brother.
Okay, so Bill Whittle, I think we have, oh man, that is the worst. People crunching their plastic water bottles. I hate that so much.
I'm sorry, man. I was thirsty. I had to drink the whole bottle.